All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming. Like I said, a lot of this stuff that I'm going to be sharing tonight is stuff, some of it that I learned at Disney, some of it that I've noticed as I've been drawing characters and drawing from life, things about um, poses and just the general stories of people that I observe. And I've noticed some things that that really help me understand qualities that make good poses. So I'm going to go and start by sharing my screen. There we go. All right. So welcome everyone to Poses That Can Tell Stories. I see a lot of people that I know, a lot of return um, people, a lot of people that I've known, and just now seeing your faces, and I love that. If you don't know me or if we haven't met before, let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm Eddie Pittman. I'm a cartoonist. I've been a cartoonist for about 35 years, which is hard to believe that someone can actually make a living as a cartoonist for 35 years. I've worked on a bunch of stuff. I've worked for Disney. I worked on about 5 Disney films. I've as a cleanup animator, and then have worked on some direct to videos, some feature films. I worked on a show called Phineas and Ferb, which was a lot of fun. I was a writer and a storyboard artist on that show, and a one-time voice actor, which was a lot of fun. And I even got to direct my own own film. I like to call it my student film, but it was much bigger than that. It was a planetarium film. It was the first time anyone had ever done a full dome hand drawn animated film. It was 360 degrees by 180 degrees, and it was called Legends of the Night Sky Orion. And I also have a graphic novel series called Red's Planet that's published by Abrams. So that's a little bit about me. So I want to start. I want to start a little bit about talking about acting, because I think a lot of things that I'm going to pull from really has its basis in acting, and I also think that visually, the visual language that we have as a culture these days is based on film, which comes from a couple of different sources of acting. Um, I want to start actually back in the 19th century. There was a man named Delsart who came up with a system of acting that was really based on poses, and they were they were outward expressions. It was an external form of acting. He would create poses and say that if you're feeling this particular emotion or this particular attitude, this is what that looks like. So there were outward expressions. He felt that the body was a readable symbol. That if the actor took a certain pose, then the audience would react. They would know how that actor was feeling and the emotion of the story. So all the acting, all the emotion was organized into poses, specific poses, and it was very melodramatic. The poses were somewhat ridiculous, and it was based in observations of life, but he kind of took it. It was a little bit exaggerated. It was kind of like watching a school play in many ways. I think so. A contemporary of his, actually, this guy came a little bit later, an American named Edmund Shaftesbury, I believe is how you would pronounce it. He wrote a book called Lessons in the Art of Acting, and this is where this is what I want to show you here. Some of these poses that he's chosen here. He has a book, and it's got over 100 different, I think it's over 100 different poses. And so if you're going to be in a play and you want to portray abject fear, then you need to kneel down. You need to hold your hands up in front of your face. You retire one of your feet behind you in an act of kneeling, and you hold your hands up, and this represents abject fear. This right here, trepidation. This is also fear, and this is fright. So there's a formula for every actor. And so an actor stands there on the stage and they say, oh, the character feels this, I have to take this pose. It's quite interesting. Here's a few more. This is love. This one on the far left here is love, of course. Everybody knows that pose because everybody does that, right? When they fall in love. There's doubt, hopeless prayer. I love, this is just an odd one, how one hand goes over the head and the other one comes up. So natural. Disguise. Now, this is a very interesting one, disguise, because it reminds me of some of the silent films of the villain holding his cloak up over his face, and you're going to see something that's very, very common in these poses, that we've seen some of these poses before. We've seen them in early film. Here's a few more. Treachery. This one's great. You got a hand up, right? You've kind of hunched over a little bit. Threatening, you got the hand up, and this is based on life, based on observation, right? Threatening someone. Amazement, astonishment. I love this one here. This is drunkenness. This is drunkenness, which is very interesting. So someone just sitting in a chair, a little disheveled, bending over. It takes any kind of discovery away from the actor of what a character may be. But this is what acting was in the 19th century. It was a big trend. I think Shaftesbury took Delsart's his work and kind of distilled it even into more cliches, and then the intention was for Delsart. But there was a shift in coming up in the 20th century with a guy named Stanislavski, who was a member of the Moscow Theater, and he wanted more subtlety. He wanted more of an internal acting. He wanted the actor to experience these emotions, dig deep, try to find something that they could relate to, and then express them. Rather than just finding a stock pose, he wanted it to come from within. So he's more interested, and it's very influenced by Freud, by the early works of Freud, and really looking into the psyche of the human experience. And so internal struggle is important. He's also very interested in the objective of the character. So what is the motivation of this character? Why is this character doing what they're doing? And also subtext, which was more Chekhov, but it's still a part of this movement of Russian acting. And this changes everything for us in the 20th century, because when you look at early film, when the camera was, especially the films of the French films, the Méliès and the other French filmmakers, the camera's just set out like an audience member in a theater, and it's just watching the action. But as soon as the cut is created and the close-ups created, the old school 19th century acting is not as powerful. We need something more. We need to see the thought process in the actor, and this changes acting. The close up. When we watch films now, we rarely it's mostly close ups now. It's well, that's not true. There's plenty of other shots, but all the acting, the camera gets close and we can see the face, we can see the thinking. And this starts with Stanislavski. He influenced an entire generation of actors and acting teachers. So here's the interesting thing about this. We see this in early animation. I'm gonna pull up a pen here. Hang on just a minute. So when we look at early animated films, they're really pulling from the 19th century system of acting. So if someone's sad, you're going to get a pose of their. This is always the pose, right? The hands in front of the eyes, rubbing the eyes. This is someone who's sad, rubbing those eyes, or maybe you even get the pose with the mouth wide open, right? And then you get the tears coming out. This is what happens every time. This is the drawing that represents sadness. The drawing that represents love is going to be, the hands here at the heart. And the shoulders up, and this is the pose of love. And maybe there's an inhale too, right? We could really bring those shoulders up to show that breathing in that emotion, breathing in that love. Anger is going to be one of those poses. It's either kind of hunched over like this. Pull this out a little bit. You got the arms coming out. Anger starts here. There's also the anger where, I love this one. This was in a Mickey Mouse cartoon, where the arms come up over the head. And then they come down very quickly and this is anger. So we see this in animation. We see all these stock poses kind of pop up in animation, especially in the silent era in the 1920s. When Walt Disney decided he wanted to make a feature film, things were going to have to change, because they told him audiences weren't going to sit through a feature-length animated cartoon. So he needed to create acting that was more naturalistic, something that people would really buy into. So the shorthand for creating poses had to stop. And what we have, and this is actually very interesting. What we have in Snow White is a form, and a lot of it was rotoscope. Grim Natwick animated a lot of Snow White, but it was heavily referenced. But you'll notice that some of these poses are straight out of the book on how to act from the 19th century, with the arms up. This reflects the acting style of the 1920s and 30s, actually more of the 20s and the 30s, because with sound films, actors had already started to change. But these poses are straight out of that book. This is the pose of fear, covering her face. Even this pose here with the prince is straight out of one of the poses that Delsart would have created. So acting is changing. It's becoming, at this point, still rooted in the 19th century. But here's something I really want to show you, because this is where it changes. There is honesty in the acting of the dwarves. If they had been portraying sadness like that iconic drawing of rubbing their eyes, this movie wouldn't have worked. But because they're experiencing sadness and grief in a way that's recognizable to us, that a shared experience of how we would show that same emotion, it sells these characters. It sells this movie. And it's not just the sadness. It's all through the movie. These characters come to life. So they're starting to tap into more naturalistic poses. I think, I'm going to pull these back a little bit. As I look at some of these poses, and as I pose my characters, there are certain qualities that I'm looking for in drawings that help me understand how to create a pose to represent the attitude or emotion that I'm looking for. They're based in behavior. I don't want to call them body language, because body language has got a bad rap. Body language is saying, when someone crosses their arms, this is what they feel. But we can cross our arms and feel any number of things. That's not a way to figure out how someone's feeling. Someone crosses their arms, they could be impatient. They could be protecting themselves. They could be shy. They could be angry. There's so many different things that could be happening with someone crossing their arms. They could be cold. So rather than body language, I'm going to look at behavioral qualities, and I'm going to go through them, and then we're going to go and look at each one individually. So there's open and closed poses, where the body tends to close off, arms in close to the body. Open poses where arms are out, the head's up. That's another thing about closed. The head can be down. It could be a pose where someone's crouched or kneeling. Closed poses and open poses, to think of them as the opposites, the polar opposites. Backward and forward. They're poses where the figure is moving forward. There's some where the figure is retreating. Low and high. Poses where they're lower, they're hunched, or they're on the ground. They're poses where they're higher. They're stepping higher. They're jumping. Heavy and light. Balanced and off-balanced. All of these are opposites, but I don't want to think of them just as opposites. I want to think of them as being on a spectrum, a slider almost. So if we look at them that way, now let's look at open and closed. So closed it could be protection, caution, vulnerability. Anytime someone starts to close off their pose, we start to see qualities that represent this. And then open tends to be more confident and more comfortable, more receptive. So these are very obvious things. I think, but the reason I want to point them out is that putting a name to it sometimes, and recognizing that that's what I'm looking at, can be can kind of be the catalyst in finding that right pose. If we're just drawing and never quite recognize what we're looking at, if we can't name it, sometimes it's hard to replicate it. We don't know why that drawing's working, why that pose is working, why it isn't working. So let's look at backward and forward. With backward, we're again. It's. Did I just go through and yeah, I did. It's just exactly the same there. So backward again. It's moving away. That's wrong. It's moving away from something. It's retreating. It's trepidation. Forward is more intention, engagement, aggression. Again, these are just very obvious qualities. Low and high. Someone is low, it's fatigue, defeat, submission. High has this connotation of confidence and aspiration, alertness. Light and heavy. Heavy is weary, it's gravity, it's age. Lightness, it's this youthfulness, stepping with energy in their steps, right, and excitement. There is, and you'll notice that there's some of these are very similar. Light and high are very similar, and then balance, calm and control. Anything that's balanced is calm and control. Off balance, instability, urgency, surprise. So what do we do with these? So let's play around with closed and open. Closed, it's protective, it's caution, vulnerability. So a closed pose would be someone who their head's down, maybe the shoulders are in, maybe those arms are crossed, or maybe there's a little bit of hunch into that pose. And rather than give them straight legs, I'm even going to put a little bit of curve there in the legs, because that closes this pose off a little bit more, this S curve here. An open pose, that chest out, this is an open pose. Confidence. So Superman is an open pose. But those are the obvious ones. Where this becomes, I think, interesting is recognizing that these are on a spectrum. That as we're doing a pose, we can pick and choose. If we've got a closed pose, we've got someone who's cautious, not sure about their environment. They want to join in. They want to be a part of whatever's going on, whatever that motivation is. And maybe what we do is in this closed pose, we start to open it up just a little bit. Maybe we raise a head. And now we've taken a closed pose and we started to move it into the direction of open. So I'm starting with, and this is what I should have started with here, I want to start with an intention. What's happening in this person? So in this closed pose, this is someone who's confident, go-getter. They want to engage with other people, right? They're excited to be here. They're having fun. This one, let's put them in a party. Not so sure. I don't want to be here. The head's down. They're not making eye contact. It's a closed pose. But what happens if someone says something that that really kind of hurts the feelings of Mr. Open Pose here? Well, we start to close the pose off a little bit. Doesn't have to be much, but maybe those arms drop. that closes this pose off a little bit, right? Maybe the head drops a little bit. The eyes can still be looking forward, right? But the head drops. And what we do is we take a confident pose, and by making choices to close off parts of this open pose, we can change the meaning of what's happening with this character, to change the meaning of the pose. You know, maybe the character who is closed, we can have them straighten up their back a little bit. Well, it's not uncross those arms. We're still protecting. And let's keep those legs in a little bit. But maybe we bring that head up. Maybe not that much. But maybe we can even combine some of these. Maybe what we do is we go forward a little bit with the head. So they're reaching out. Same character, although they look very different from these crappy drawings. But as the pose opens up, we get a different feel for what's happening. So what we want to do is we want to play around with ideas of these behavioral qualities that can open up possibilities for a pose. Because oftentimes we're looking at the pose and saying, why isn't this communicating confidence? Well, maybe you've turned your pose in a wrong way. Maybe you have the character sitting down and they're hunching over, but that's not what a confident person does. So before we go forward, I want to bring something up. And those of you guys who have studied with me before know all about this, because this is what I always talk about. So I want to talk about, did I even bring that? I don't have that. So I want to talk about the principle of contrast and affinity, because it's the lens that I look through pretty much everything, visually, story. It's something I learned from a film producer named Bruce Block. Thought I had Bruce's book cover in here, but I don't. So there's a film producer named Bruce Block, and he also teaches a required class at the University of Southern California's film school. And his class is called The Visual Structure, or The Visual Elements of Film. I believe that's the name of his class. But Bruce used to come to the Disney studio. He still goes to studios and advises and teaches workshops and gives lectures on the visual elements of film. And I had the pleasure of learning from Bruce back in the late 90s. So Bruce's his lectures and his class are all about creating a visual structure that matches the narrative structure of film. His book is called The Visual Story. It's a fantastic book. It's not as good as his lectures, because he shows clips from movies and shows you everything he's talking about. But all of these visual elements, from line to tone to color to movement, rhythm, continuity, all these visual elements, and I know I'm missing a couple, are controlled by a principle called the principle of contrast and affinity. So let's break it down. Contrast is complete opposites. So black and white from a tonal scale are complete opposites. The ultimate contrast is black and white. Anything that's close together on this scale has an affinity, a sameness. They're similar. That's easy enough. We can also have contrast in direction and quality of line. So a straight line getting progressively curved. The contrasting lines would be obviously this one and this one, whereas curves that are similar have an affinity. So affinity, sameness, contrast, difference. And here's the principle. The greater the visual contrast, the greater the visual intensity. The greater the visual affinity, the less visual intensity. And you're saying, like many of us did when we heard it, duh, that's obviously. But the problem with where it's a brilliant rule is it helps us to control things. So if I'm drawing a figure, if I'm drawing a character, and here's my character. It's a really boring character. And why is that character boring? Well, that character is just standing straight up and down. There's just complete affinity here. It's nothing but vertical lines. There's nothing interesting here. Okay, well, I'm going to draw that character, and I'm going to make that character really dynamic. All right, great. And there we go. We have them pull out all the stops with contrast, full contrast. So this is the more visual intense drawing. This is the least visual intense drawing. But where it comes into play is the kind of story that we want to tell. The principle of contrast and affinity isn't about telling us how to create really quiet, soft, boring drawings. It's not about telling us how to draw really crazy active drawing. It's about telling us what to do in this area. What kind of drawings do we do here? Well, I have a moment that's quiet. I would tell you this, but I have a moment that's quiet where someone is but they've just found out something really devastating, right? So it's a quiet moment, but you want maybe a little bit of contrast in that pose, because without it, then it's boring, right? Or you've got someone who's walking to the mailbox. Well, you're not going to pull out all the contrast of Tom Cruise running down a road to go to the mailbox. You're going to have someone who's just kind of casually walking to the mailbox. I see a lot of times in people creating stories of feeling like this panel's not interesting enough, the scene's not interesting enough, I need to push that pose more. But the story and the character, their motivation, should dictate how much contrast or how much affinity we put into that drawing. So here's what I want to bring this back to, because I forgot about this. When I was back in the 90s, we had a big comic glut. The comics were huge. It was mostly driven by a speculative market. And so they were hiring anyone because they're doing so many comics. A lot of people drawing comics that really didn't have the ability to draw comics. It's a very difficult thing. And I remember seeing a DC comic where some hero was answering the phone, and he had, I wish I had that drawing now, but here was the pose of him answering the phone back when we had corded phones. Had the phone, his bicep was flexing, and I realized, because I used to buy Muscle and Fitness magazine because it was a great reference for drawing muscles. And I remember looking at that and seeing, hang on just a minute, and seeing this guy on the phone and going, I know that pose. And hang on, computer. There's the spinning wheel. All right, that's what happens. So my computer's on its last legs, and there it is. So I'm going to flip this. And that's not the pose that I saw, but that guy had used a pose, practically traced it, of a guy doing preacher curls. And no one picks up a tiny, especially a superhero, is not going to pick up a tiny phone. And with his muscles flexing, the phone's just not that heavy. And but that was the reference he used. It didn't tell the story. It was just the reference he used so that he could draw muscles. So a lot of these principles are about what to draw and when to draw it. There's another little story I want to tell you before we go and look at some artwork that from some real masters. I was talking to my wife last week and telling her about some of these things I'd come up with. And she brought up an acting class. This goes back to the Stanislavski stuff. She was in an acting class in college, and the teacher said on the first day of class, "Hey, somewhere in this class, I've hidden $100 bill, and I want you guys to go and find that $100 bill, and I'll give you about 10 minutes, and we're not going to do it very long. But if you can find that $100 bill, you can keep it." So everybody started rushing. Oh no, I'm sorry, I messed the story up. Beth. That's not what happened. He said, "I want you to act like there's a $100 bill in this room, and I want you to go around and act like you're trying to find that $100 bill." And of course, what everyone did was they did the typical, the poses where they're looking under everything. They're really telegraphing their, they're picking things up and looking under them, and just like it's overacting, right? Hey, it's not there, and moving around the room, and finally put an end to it. And he said, "Okay, that's fine. But I will tell you this. I did actually hide a $20 bill somewhere in this room. Will take about 5 minutes. And if you can find that $20 bill, it's yours. You can keep it." And everything changed. People were genuinely looking for that $20 bill. And he stopped him after 5 minutes. He said, "Okay, I promise you it's here. You can find it. You can look all through the semester, but we're going to get back to class. But here's the thing. I want you to be aware of what you did when you were actually looking for a $20 bill. What were your mannerisms? What were your actions? What were you thinking?" And he said, "That's what I want you to think about the rest of the semester. I want you to look for the $20 bill." And I think that's a great lesson in approaching poses. Is let's try to find something genuine in these poses and find out and look for that $20 bill. Okay, let's take a look at some masters. I want to start with Al Dorn, and let's take a look at some of the behavioral things that we were talking about, and let's see how Al Dorn does it. So Albert Dorn was a illustrator from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and he was also the founder of the famous artist course, which was a fantastic mail order class on how to draw. And if you can find copies of that book, they are the best drawing resources ever So let's take a look at some of this stuff, because I think Dorn captures poses and behavior better than most artists of this era. So look how, let's first start with open. Look how open this pose is. He's got his chest back. The legs are apart. Try to find the right color here. The legs are apart. Look at this. There's this S curve here that's really beautiful. And the head turned, looking back at the action. It's beautifully composed. Everything is pointing to what just happened. Even the neck is lifting up. This pose has a sense of highness as well. He's lifting up. The shoulders are lifting up. Holding that belt. Look at everyone else that's posing in here. Now, she is acting surprised. That's a very open pose, but she's not really threatened. This guy, look how closed this pose is. Some of these are compositional decisions of pointing into the center here, of framing the guy who just went down. This is open, but it's also closed. It's closed because he's turned the figure. The figure isn't on his side. He's turned the figure and foreshortened him, which closes it off a little bit. Also bringing that chest up and the head behind there, it helps to close this pose off a little bit. Low, high. We've got a low vantage point. Our horizon line is, if we follow this down and follow this, that's our horizon line right there. So we have a low horizon line that makes him look taller, and we're still looking down on this guy. So it's beautiful composition here and the decisions. Everything else is closed off. Look at this. He's closed. All of this space becomes closed space. Hunching those shoulders, very closed off. Low, high. Even this guy, this is a closed off pose as well. Open against all these closed poses, framed by this other open pose. These are decisions that he's making. This isn't haphazard. Love this one. Group of guys playing cards. Well, cards are very interesting because anybody holding cards is in a closed pose. They've got those cards up against their chest so that no one can see them. Now, we open it up a little bit by lifting his head up. He's even got, we see the underside of the hat. So it's open a little bit here. There's a sense of confidence in this guy, but he's also kind of closed, kind of protective. This guy, look how open this pose is. That head up, the hand out as he's dropping the chips down. He's got his cards up against his chest too. But that guy doesn't have much of a poker face. There's some confidence there. And we're able to see that by this open space that he's given us, that he did put this guy here. I don't know why this guy's so important to the scene. He's writing stories, so maybe there was something that had to be there. But he's pushed him back by the use of value so that we can see these characters a lot better. And he's opened up this space. This is a nice open space between them. Gives this guy more of a sense of confidence, and he's very different from the rest of the guys who are playing. See, even this guy, I love this. I just noticed this. He's even got his hand. He's hiding the cards. This is a very closed off pose. Lifting that head, where he's raising that head. That's another one of those behavioral aspects. I love this. And I put this in here more than anything for the use of contrast. Here's a guy getting thrown out. Look how much contrast he pulls out for this pose. just if you were to look at the silhouette alone, let's just do this real quick. Even that hand down there. So this is where a lot of times I see, oops, that didn't work. That's where I see a lot of people kind of not pushing this as far. They want an action pose, but they've hidden one of the hands. What we want for something that really pulls out all the stops in contrast is we want a strong silhouette that really, look at that. I'm just going to put that up against white. Look at all the contrast that's happening here. And it reads in silhouette before we see any detail. And also, beyond that, he's using all these lines. He's purposefully has more wrinkles on this guy than he does over here, because every one of these lines going in diagonals. There's nothing horizontal or vertical in this character. Even his glasses are diagonal. Full contrast. These guys, not as much, right? They're very open poses because we have action. They just threw him out. But there's more affinity in these poses than there is in this pose, because this is the action we want to see. This is what we want to feel. And what does he also do? He throws all of these papers and everything scattered everywhere. Full contrast. Great pose. Dorn was a master of scenes full of crowd scenes, and this one right here is really well done. So look at forward. This guy moving forward because there are accusations. Contrast. He's not just having a finger point, right, with a closed hand. He's got every finger splayed. Look at the position of that hammer breaking that silhouette. And then you've got this guy also head lifted, moving forward, moving toward this character. So aggression in forward poses. She's even moving forward, that fist out. This arm straight, this one curved. He's less forward. He moves forward. So he's controlling the contrast in his drawing, which is great, because you want to do that. You don't want it to get too crazy. So he's got a lot of poses in here that have more affinity to them, because if we pulled out all the stops on these guys, we wouldn't see them. We put them up against a bright open space so that we can see these poses, and he's pushing these poses forward because it's aggression. He's raising that head because it's confidence. No one's cowering here. People are reacting, but no one's really cowering. We don't see anyone really hunched over. Everybody's moving. This is a big melee happening here. Everyone's after everybody else. Beautifully done. This one's nice. It's subtle, but closed off, open just enough, right? As mom and dad judge whatever's going on in that room in the 1950s. So dad, it still is kind of closed off. That arm up, pulling back the sleeve, checking his watch. These are defensive poses. These are poses of impatience. And they're beautifully done. They're very recognizable very quickly. And the last, Michael Dorn, who played Worf, wrong Dorn. The last Al Dorn is another crowd scene, which is so good. And so often his crowd scenes are fight scenes. I don't know why that is. But look at the contrast again. Fingers splayed because he wants that full impact. He's made sure that there's plenty of space around this character so that we can read that silhouette. That's his leg. Full contrast there, right? Raises him up too above everyone else. If he was lower, we wouldn't see him. Open pose, moving forward. Even those fingers are all the hand open like that. That's part of an open pose. Moving forward. People are moving forward for the purposes of storytelling, but also compositionally. They're helping to move your eye in. She's moving back, kind of opens the space up. He's moving forward. This is a very closed pose. This is a guy with his glasses and hat. He's not real sure what to do here. Here, honey, don't get involved, right? Let the police handle this as she's moving forward. So nice contrast between these guys. He's closed off, she's open and moving forward. He's moving backwards. Look at that. We've got a diagonal. He's going this direction. He's moving here, she's moving there. So you can see how some of these elements start to come in as we're telling stories and composing. We're thinking about, how do I convey the story here? Now let's take a look at some guy named Norman Rockwell, who did a few paintings. So Rockwell, we get the same kind of stuff. Quieter moments from Rockwell than Al Dorn, but look at this. This is forward. I love this because there's an arch to her back there. I just noticed that, and that's beautiful because her legs are here. She's moving forward. It's a closed pose here, but open. Hands up. There's a shyness, but an openness too. There's protection, but also a sense of wanting to engage, wanting to go forward. I love this shape here because, it isn't him doing this. Well, that's crazy. It isn't him leaning in. It's him standing and leaning forward. So it's very different. So it's less aggressive, right? So if he were like really, the bartender who's hitting on the girl is doing, he's doing this, right? He's got his hand on the bar, and that's a different pose. That's a different confidence. So this is interesting too. He uses this as a compositional element to bring us in. And brings her head back so that it opens up this space so we can see what's happening. I love this one. These guys are being playful. They're having fun. They're trying out this perfume as they're here to fix the plumbing. They're a mess. They are a complete contrast visually to the nice, clean decor of this woman's room. And he's spraying him with perfume. And how do we get a playful pose? We get it with S-curves. So there's two things happening here. He's moving forward, but he's also moving back. But his head's moving forward. That's what happens with an S-curve, that you get a variety of positions. S-curves work when something's playful. They work when someone's unbalanced, because it really flows. And so you get this nice diagonal here, brings the eye in. He, not as strong an S-curve as he's playing, but obviously the expressions make this as well. Look at the silhouette of these fingers. He's not just holding this. The fingers, the openness of the fingers are helping us see this dainty little perfume container. And it also opens up this space here. compositionally. But moving forward and back at the same time, it's some of the same qualities we were talking about. I love this one. Again, forward. She's being aggressive, as they both have the same picture of the same guy wearing a uniform. She is moving forward. I'm going to put a white over this. Even this arm is moving forward. So the attitude of this pose is moving in this direction. She's not moving forward, but she's standing her ground. So she's getting pushed back a little bit, but her pelvis is saying, I'm not budging. So we have contradicting. We have forward and backwards where she's getting pushed. Now, there are two things. We can, these poses are reading with these elements. That head is up. Her head is not mirroring hers. These are not mirror poses. These are two very different kinds of poses, because they're also very different kinds of girls. She's dressed, we've got rakes here. I don't know why there are two rakes, but we've got her, obviously two mailboxes, two different households. But she's been working. She's got gloves on. She is all dressed up in this nice skirt. She's more feminine in her look. So there's a contrast between the two different characters, but look at the attitude that's coming through some of these principles. She lifts that head up. I feel like if I had to pick the one who has more of an attitude, who's a little more snooty, it's going to be her. And it's not just the clothing, and she looks like she's maybe rich and she isn't. I don't know. But we might project that. But the truth is, that chin up like that are some of those qualities that we can associate with that confidence. Love this one. Very famous Rockwell. And look at the contrast as everyone nicely dressed, walking off to church, heads held high as he looks at his dad. But they're high. Dad is lower than the sun. He is, I don't mean the sun in the sky, lower than his son. As he's below the silhouette of the chair, he's hiding. Don't bother me. He's got his shoulders up, the knees are up. It's a closed pose. It's low compared to their height, right? So same kind of elements happening. Same thing happening here. I love this one. Dad is forward. Look how close this pose is. Wow, this kid is. He doesn't want to hear it. He's protecting himself. I think this is called the talk or something like that. Look, the knees are closed. Those knees are together. The feet are turned in. This is a closed. His head is lowered. This is a closed pose. Dad's not real comfortable about talking about this either, right? Whatever he's talking about. But it's open enough, and it's forward. He's moving in, and it's open, moving forward. Great contrast between the two different poses. So I'm going to skip at this point now, because what I want to do is I want to go through how do we see this in film and animation. Those are great illustrators, but when we see it in cartooning as well, and we see it in animation. So here's a scene from The Incredibles. This is a great scene. This is a scene where Bob has come back after having gone out and listening to the police scanner and stopping a robbery. Helen's not happy about this. She's been here. She's been waiting up for him. And so what I want you to see, and go and watch this scene, and turn the sound off when you watch it. It's a great scene, But what they've done in telling this scene, you've got a low horizon here. Bob is always taller than Helen in this scene. The distance between the two of them is important for a storytelling point. She's closed. Look at this. Her arms are folded. Her legs are crossed. She's closed. He's open just because he's got a piece of cake in his hand, by the way. He's open. He's still kind of on the high of being a hero that night, but she's confronting him. She's not happy. Her pose is closed. There's a few scenes or shots that come between those, but then we have forward Helen, even after she's picked this piece of rubble off of his jacket. He's eating the cake now. That's what's happening here. He's still open. He's not backing down from her. He's straight up and down. He's standing his ground, but she's moving forward. Look how she's still moving forward here. Now, as he's fighting back in a verbal sense, look at the forward movement of his head here. This is a closed pose here with the hands on the hips, but leaning in, because this is an argument, and this is part of this. Look at him coming in for this. Forward, even more forward. Look at that. And it pushes her back a little bit. She is now starting to move back from his moving forward. So there's a relationship happening here between the two poses. As he pushes forward, she has to physically move back a little bit. She's reacting. Acting is reacting, right? This one, she's standing her ground. She's not moving. She knows she's right. He knows he's right. Still moving forward. Here's the important thing about this. He's still bigger than her. But as this goes, and as they become more aggressive, this is what the filmmakers do. And I put this in here because I think this is interesting. Even though we're looking right at him, he's still moving forward to her. And then she literally grows larger until she's bigger than him. So the dynamics of this scene, that's where the real storytelling is, the choices of the staging of this scene and the blocking of this scene, that Helen actually becomes larger than Bob. It's absolutely brilliant. But even here, look, she's still moving forward. They've just discovered the kids are listening to them. And he's less forward than he was because she's the aggressor now. But look at this. Forward, he's still open. She's open now, although the hands are at that's a fighting pose. She's ready to fight, and she's become more dominant. So just using some of these principles, higher and lower, forward, open, closed, really helped to tell this story. And there's one other Disney example I want to draw, or look at to show us where this can work. This very famous scene. You guys all know the scene from Lady and the Tramp. This is wonderful. This idea of the two of them. Now, go and watch this scene. Turn the sound off. Always turn the sound off, so you don't get caught up in the story, and watch what happens. This scene is so beautiful and this whole film is beautiful, because they managed to capture both human emotions and behavior simultaneously with dog behavior. We're back and forth. They're dogs, but then all of a sudden they're human. And the way that they juxtapose these two qualities is absolutely brilliant. So this is a scene, this is a reaction shot where she's finally warmed up to Tony and Joe, and Tony gets upset with Joe because we're not going to give them bones, and he knocks the bones out of his Joe's hands, and she cowers. So we get, now that's a very obvious pose, right? Because she's cowering. But I want to watch what happens here. Very open between the two of them as they're eating their dinner, and she continues, because this is part of her character, that we see the top of her head a lot. His ears are raised. It's part of his character because he's confident. He's so confident. She's shy. She's demure, and that head comes down a little bit. We see the top of her head. We see his ears up. We don't see the top of his head. So there is openness here, but there's just a little less on her because she's a different character. It's not part of her personality, but she's having a wonderful time. So in a dreamy kind of look, as she's looking at Tony off stage with his accordion or off camera, that head starts to raise. Perfect sense of safety and openness. There's nothing to be afraid of here. Nice, too, that they're both looking at different directions. They're setting up the gag, obviously. But those ears up, open, very open. And as this progresses and they come in, and those ears are still up, she lowers that head into a more shy pose, which is closed. He is still more open than she is, but we're using this to bring attention in. He's forward, right? And then as he comes down to nudge the meatball, he resumes his open pose and forward, still forward. But that head is down a little bit. And then we have her closed, but those eyeballs raised. There's a sense of less protective, right? She's open, but she's shy. And then by the end of the scene, she's looking up at him, opening that pose up. Beautiful examples there. Before I start into the next section, I want to open it up to some questions. We've been at this for about an hour, and I'm going to come back over to the screen here. And if you guys want to ask any questions, this is a great time. Go and open up your microphones, and we can talk a little bit.
Hey, this is Brian.
Hey, Brian.
I don't have any questions. I just want to say, man, this is great, solid gold stuff, and I'm loving it all. I'm writing it down. I can't wait till you post to YouTube so I can bookmark it and refer to it all the time. Um, Please keep going.
Well,
I'm
thank you,
loving it.
man. I appreciate that. Solid gold. I love that. I was always a big fan of solid gold. Want to be one of the dancers. So thanks. I appreciate that. Um, any other comments or questions or any mistakes I made besides the Michael Dorn mistake? So
I had a question
sure.
just about acting and animation because it seems to be more squarely rooted in stage acting versus film acting. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, I've always wondered why that is. First of all, do you
Yeah.
agree with that kind of assessment? And why would that be?
It it isn't. So I think here's the problem. Well, you know, we used to have actors come in and teach us acting classes when I was at Disney, and they were from Hollywood. They were TV and film actors, terrific people, and they were really teaching Stanislavski. They were teaching whether it was either, you know, from the people who taught that method here in the United States, whether it was you know, Adler or Meisner or some, it was method. It was about internalizing the character, finding that motivation, understanding the motivation of the character, the objective. And I struggled with that because I knew that doesn't help me always understand how to draw that. If I were on stage, or if I were in a movie and acting, then that would be very helpful. But as I'm animating, I can't just internalize that and forget about what my actions are. I have to visualize those actions. So that was always a contradiction for me. But I don't think we've gone all the way back to 19th century acting. I think we've gone, I think and it's a spectrum, and I meant to even do this, draw this out. I think it's a spectrum, just like contrast and affinity, just like all these qualities, open and closed. We are somewhere closer to stage acting, right? Where the posture and the attitude and the pose are important so that the people in the balcony can see what you're doing. But we're still in the middle, right? We still have to be aware of what the objective of the character is. Because here's what it is. If you think about the 19th century acting and the 20th century acting, what we have there is we have a spectrum, or the two opposing things aren't just external and internal. It really is verisimilitude and truth. It's the verisimilitude being the appearance of truth, a veneer of truth. And that's what those poses were, right? I strike this pose if if the character is feeling sad, and then the audience will recognize it. But the subtlety of film acting today, that wouldn't read on stage. So we're in the middle there. We are trying to find honesty, but we're trying to show it visually. Does that make sense? And I think when you look at great animation, go watch The Incredibles. The acting is amazing. The toward the end of the movie, when they the whole film is about, it's not a film about superheroes. It's a film about a family. It's a film about, because they say it in the very beginning. It was you can't just be Mr. Incredible. You have to be more. And then in that final scene, he has to learn that he can't do it on his own, that he has to be a family. He can't just be Mr. Incredible. He has to be more than that. And that's being a father, and being a family. And there's a scene where they kind of park the Winnebago, right? It rolls into place, and he takes off, and he's like, "Stay there." And she's like, "We're going with you." And he says, "No." And he says, "I'm not strong enough." And she says, "And this makes you strong?" He says, "No, I can't lose you. I'm not strong enough." And it's an amazing scene, and it is so subtly acted. Pixar has the ability to do that with computer animation. We struggled to do that. So we have in that movie broad acting, beautiful staging in that scene that I showed you right there, the blocking of the two of them, and the visual structure. So Pixar, Bruce Block, big influence on Pixar. Lee Unkrich, who was their editor, studied under Bruce Block at USC. So they were doing great filmmaking from the very beginning. And so that whole scene of them arguing that I showed you is really about the posturing, and they knew exactly what they were doing by making Helen bigger in the end. But that film is full of scenes that are beautifully visually acted, that push more toward the 19th century external acting. but then also subtly acted. When we get into those close-ups, I have no doubt that the animator understood what's going on inside that character. Does that kind of answer your question, Keith? Okay.
Eddie, I had or a thought of the sort of a question too.
Sure.
I wonder if there's a difference here between cartooning and animation. I mean, you're a cartoonist and animator. I'm just a cartoonist, and
Yeah.
so I've always felt like I really did have to gesture to the back of the theater and make the big grand gestures because
Yeah.
I'm static. I can't move. I can't.
Yeah.
So I don't have that dimension of motion that you have, and I don't have sound, and I don't have smell. I don't have all these other things that people in real life have to
Yeah.
tell each other what's going on. So I've always kind of felt that I needed to make the
I'm
big gesture
I'm
to make clear what I'm communicating.
and I'm glad you brought that up because I meant to bring that up. So if you think of it as like a timeline or a spectrum, right? A line, and you've got, the external acting, you've got the animation of the 1920s. Comic strips are in that area too. If you look at Charlie Brown, he's not subtly acting. Charles Schultz had a set number of poses that he would draw that would be iconic acting. And I think iconic is the word. So a cartoonist is communicating, first of all, in a smaller space. And I think their drawings are more iconic. Not too different than the emojis we use now, right? You write something and you throw an emoji on there so someone understands what you're saying. Same thing with Peanuts. He only had a handful of poses, right? But if you look at Calvin and Hobbes, he's changing the pose. He never draws the same thing twice. It's a different style. It's looser. It's still not full acting, but it seems like he's creating it individually. Each comic strip, he's trying to come up with a new drawing. But I think you're right. I think if we were to look at the spectrum, comic strips and a lot of comic books kind of live down there in that area. It's not too different than Scott McCloud's triangle that he has in Understanding Comics, where he has the very and I can't even. He had word at the top, so language, written language. He has realism down here in the bottom corner, the right corner, and then he has really abstract stuff on the far side. I think that's how he had it structured. And then he had this where everybody kind of fell into this map of style. And I think that's what we're seeing. And the reason is they're obviously two different mediums. I love to point out the obvious. And so they're communicating different things. We're not getting deep stories in comics. Now, if I was doing Watchmen and drawing like Charles Schultz, it doesn't work, right? I have to draw like Dave Gibbons in order to convey that kind of character. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think some of this stuff still helps, right? Even if you're drawing simplified characters, understanding a simple posture can change the character and the way that your audience feels about that character. And understanding that I'm closing off this pose because we're still working with silhouettes, whether we're doing full animation for Disney or Pixar or we're drawing a simple comic strip. We're still using the same tools. We're just not. It's just maybe less, right? Less detail, but we're still communicating the same thing. All right. Anybody else? Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you have any tips of how to make poses less stiff because I've been struggling with that a lot
Yeah.
lately. So thank you.
I think so. I think contrast and affinity, the principle there can help. Because what we have a tendency as artists to straighten everything up. When I used to teach figure drawing, I found that if a model's standing, as the artist draws, they start to straighten everything up. They line the head up with the shoulders and everything, and they've completely missed the subtleties of movement in the pose. So that's just part of us. That's part of visually what we do. We straighten everything up. There's so what you have to do is you have to push that pose. You have to push the contrast of that pose. You have to be aware of finding movement in that pose. So I'm going to show you some things in just a minute because I want to go over in our last last 40 minutes here. I want to go over some things that Walt Stanchfield talked about in drawing verbs, and I will address some of that for you. Okay, Connie. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's jump back in here, and I'm going to share. Go back. All right. So so there was a Disney animator, assistant animator, named Walt Stanchfield. Matter of fact, I think he worked on Lady and the Tramp. He in the 1970s and 80s with Eric Larson, he started teaching classes, drawing classes at the Disney studio. I never got to meet him. He was out in LA. But our weekly newsletter always had his notes from his drawing class. And they were always very interesting because sometimes they'd be drawing instruction. Sometimes they would be about him playing tennis. Sometimes they were about Zen, anything that he wrote about. But he'd find some kind of connection to drawing. One of the things that, and two big volumes of his notes have been published, edited by Don Hahn, the Disney producer. One of the things that Walt Stanchfield talked about, it was less about anatomy and more about drawing gesturally, and then also the action of the pose, pushing it, and most and finding, drawing verbs, not just drawing nouns. Don't draw a runner. Don't draw don't draw a cowboy or a salesman. Draw the verb. Draw what they're doing. I always struggled with this. I struggled with drawing verbs because sitting is kind of boring. This is sitting. And that's a verb. That's someone sitting, someone standing. There's nothing inherently interesting about that. So I could draw verbs, but it really doesn't tell me anything about the character. So I always struggled with it because I'm not that imaginative when it comes to verbs. But I realized that I was using the wrong kind of verbs. I'm often told I use the wrong language. Because sitting and those other verbs, they're mechanical verbs. They're verbs that describe actions. What we're looking for story verbs. We want to find verbs that communicate acting. So instead of sitting, maybe we draw collapsing. Maybe we draw sulking. We draw waiting. We draw relaxing. So we draw verbs, but we draw verbs that have connections to story. So someone who's collapsing is someone who's exhausted, and this is kind of based on a pose I showed last workshop by Albert Dorn of a woman collapsed in a chair after a New Year's Eve party. So now I have a motivation. I have an objective in this pose. I know what that character's feeling. They're collapsing. And I'm looking for contrast, right? Because I want to show this. I could draw collapsing in other ways, but if this person's sitting and collapsing and their arms up, maybe up over the arms of the chair, right? Sulking. What does sulking look like while sitting? Well, it's gonna be a closed pose, and I'm gonna do this. I want it to be visually interesting, but it's closed. I'm gonna bring the knees in here. I'm gonna bring that leg behind. Arms crossed, head down, shoulders up. Sulking, sitting and sulking. Now I have a different kind of pose. Someone waiting sitting and waiting. There are certain things that we do when we're waiting. Maybe it's as cliche as looking at a watch, right? We could do that. Maybe it's this is a very kind of Rockwell thing where you have someone sitting there and the hands folded neatly in the chair, in the lap rather, and just kind of waiting, face up, looking up. It's open, but it's also but it's someone waiting. It's not reading quite as well as I wanted it to. Let's do this. Bringing those hands down into the lap, shoulders straight. This is someone who's very kind of, proper, sitting with good posture, but they're looking up, trying to find something to look at, like sitting in a waiting room. You're just waiting. And then, relaxing. Someone who's relaxing, it's a very different thing. What could we do for relaxing? Obviously, we want to pose that has movement in it. S-curves, much more fluid, relaxing. Let's bring an arm up over the couch. Maybe they got a book or something, because everybody reads books now. No one's on their phone. This is, relaxing. So all of these are sitting, but these are stories. These aren't just action verbs. They're not mechanical. They're telling stories. So let's do a few more of these, because I think I'll pull up. I've got a list over here of verbs. Let's do some standing, because that was another one. I had, let's see, where were you? Well, let's just try some of these. So, oftentimes, and I struggle with these, doing verbs, because it's grammar. But finding the intention. So if you take the mechanical verb and then you add an intention to it, then you can usually start to find the action verb. So let's do lurking. Someone who's lurking. I'm gonna make it a closed pose, right? Because their arms. Someone lurking would almost be, in this particular pose, almost. They don't want to be caught. So there's a protectiveness to it. I've got the head turned. The body's moving away, but the head is turned, right? Almost as if they're ready to move. Because they're kind of lurking. They are lurking, because that's what I'm drawing. Confronting. We kind of did a confronting pose last workshop. So it's confronting is exactly what Helen was doing. So we're stepping forward. You can bring that neck out if they're really confronting those. Now, one thing that I'm doing is I'm thinking of silhouette. So there's an affinity to the silhouette that I'm creating here. It doesn't have to be. I could bring the arms out here as he's lurking, right? Still lurking. It's about the whatever quality you're bringing to that character. This guy's confronting. He's got his fist. I want to break that silhouette. I don't want to keep it inside. I want to be able to see the silhouette of that hand. And I just closed it off again. And then he's moving forward. So he's confronting. We could push it even more. I mean, if he's really pissed off, we could really push him further, right? He's really moving in if we push it this way. So these are some things to think about. I just recalled that there's one other thing I want to do here. I want to show you a clip from a Buster Keaton movie. So this is a clip from, if you've never watched Buster Keaton, what is wrong with you? One of the greatest filmmakers of all time. He was absolutely brilliant. And Charlie Chaplin's great too. I'm bringing up Keaton because Chaplin makes a lot of facial expressions. Keaton, on the other hand, is always so deadpan. So much of his acting comes from his full body that it's really great to look at. Now, he is oftentimes thought of as, his stunts are usually what people think of. But he was a wonderful actor. So I'm going to show you a scene from The Goat. To set the scene up, he just was, and the sound is turned off. You don't need sound anyway. It's silent. And I think a lot of the music that they have on these movies a lot of times is distracting anyway. But to set it up, he was just waiting in a bread line and missed his chance, didn't get bread. He's down on his luck. And I'm going to move this over here. And so he sees a horseshoe, and I'll let the rest of it play out. All right, so there it is. This is so well done. And what I want to look at, how where we see him changing. we're going to actually take a look at this and draw over it. Take a look at it frame by frame here, and just look at some of the poses here, not frame by frame, because everybody's got somewhere to be. So there's so much. What's happening here is that we can see his thought process, and this is very interesting because we're talking about how, the early silent film, we have a lot of 19th century acting, but we see quite a bit of thought from him. So, but we're going to look at his poses, and we're going to maybe do a little drawing over him. So this pose right here, he's really down on his luck. He's dejected here. Look at, all right. Didn't do this right, did I? I'm not going to be able to draw over this. I'm trying to. I might have to turn it. How do I do this again? It's been a while since I've done this. I think I need to make a new video group. And then I can draw. Can I draw? I have to convert it to frames. All right. So we'll convert it to frames. We'll see if that works. Okay, so it's not going to let me do it. I should have tested this out before. Oh, there it is. There it is. Well, I really screwed things up now. All right, so we're just going to take a look at it without all of that. Let's just revert. Sorry about that. So as he comes in, look at this pose. I tell you what we're going to do. This will be even better. We're going to do a new pose. And we're just going to put them side by side. That'll work. I sound like Bob Ross, don't I? Look at this pose right here. There's a kind of an S curve happening here. He's up against that shoulder, but he's leaning in, head down. This is a closed off pose, hands in pockets. So we've got a closed off pose here. And this is, so it sets the scene. Guy down on his luck, right? Sees that, no reaction, just kind of kicks it away. Pose hasn't changed any. If anything, he has pushed into that pose even more. That with that leg coming out like this, his head is even further down now than it was. When this guy comes in and picks it up, he opens up a little bit to watch. That chin goes up. Look at that chin. And then when this guy picks up the wallet, watch the changes. What we want to watch is the changes in Keaton. And look at how look how straighter he is now as he has become interested. His posture straighter, his head's up. I even wonder if the hat was by design, if he knew that side of the hat would expose his face better. So we get a change in attitude. Look at that step. That's a big step. It's a big step that takes him out really quick. If he walked out in normal size steps, his gait would have been different. His character would have been different. He took a big step to get out of that scene really quick. Interest? He's forward. He is moving forward. I don't know how I managed to get vector in here. It's just one of those things. There we go. So we have this relationship. He's invading this guy's space too. He's moving in forward, hands in pocket. I'm exaggerating it, but this is exactly what he's doing. Now watch this change. I love this. He actually mugs the camera. He's thinking. We see the thought process. He actually looks at us for a very split second. And that, look how fast he turns. And this whole pose right here is just this sense of that neck is forward. He's pointing toward where he's going. Look, his hat's a little different this time than it was in the previous scene, but he still got his hands in his pocket, but he turns and he points with his nose, and actually his body's still here. And then when he takes off, he anticipates and then rushes out. This is amazing. This whole sequence, I don't know how he didn't break his arm. Look at all these poses. We talk about contrast and affinity. This is pure contrast. He is everywhere. He's all across the scene in different places. So there's a contrast of continuum where your eye is, where it's moving back and forth. He reaches down here. All the trash. This is by design, guys. The trash he's throwing out, all this paper, is creating more contrast in the scene. And then he even jumps up there. He's high now. He's gone from down here to up there. And then this, I have no idea how he didn't break his arm right there. And then grabs it. And then straightens up. Spits on it. I love how he like very quickly like gets ready for something to happen now, right? This guy's great too. But now he's ready. He's waiting. There's a different posture to him as he's experienced this. He's waiting, but this is my favorite. And he's looking around. He's looking for a wallet. Look at his posture. He's so much different here. He's looking around. He's impatient now. That's he's looking around, impatient, and he looks back and sees this guy. And rather than just turning immediately, oh, I love this. This is so great. He kind of tries to pretend like nothing happened. Look at these poses. So he's looking in one direction. His body's turned in another. Right? It's contradiction there. It's closed. Hands in pockets are still closed. Right? Oh, I love that. Look how it changes there. He goes down like he's, like you're trying to get a better look, but just, hands are still in the pocket. Really opens up that pose now. And this becomes contrast too, because we're, talking about animation, we're talking about film. Any one of these individual poses is a great storytelling pose. But in a sequence, what he's doing, and this is anticipation, he's playing an opposite before he takes off. So he goes back into this. We got one leg forward, like he's ready, kind of ready to go. He's kind of looking in this direction. And then he leans back. I even wonder if he knew the wall was there. And he's up against the wall, and then boom, there he goes. And he goes fast. Look at talk about the contrast. Look at this, even though it's blurred because of the cameras at the time. Look at this pose. There is so much. I wish there was a cleaned up version of this, or a sharper version. This is such a great pose. He was absolutely amazing to watch. So, having looked at some of this and seen some of the same kind of stuff, pushing forward here, some of the same kind of qualities I was talking about, I want to give you guys some challenges. First challenge. I think this one's. Both of these challenges are things that I do. I would never give you guys something that I don't do myself. First one. Watch a scene from an old movie with the sound and subtitles turned off. Now, I say an old movie, and here's why. Modern films are great. I love modern films. Scenes have progressively, for the past 50 years, scenes have progressively gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. You got to go back sometimes to older films to find long scenes with medium shots where you can see the whole body of the actor, and you get to see their acting choices. You get to see them change. You see their characters change throughout the scene as the story beats happen. So go back to an old film. I just watched Arsenic and Old Lace the other night. Such a brilliant film. And Cary Grant is amazing in that. And he changes on a dime because it's the whole premise of the movie is so crazy. Great characters. But watch a scene, turn the sound off. If you want to, watch the film with sound first, but then go back, turn it off so that you're just watching the performance. And then you want to ask yourself, what does the character want? What story verb is describing their behavior? Try to be as specific as possible. I struggle with this. This one's really tough for me. And then, which behavioral qualities do you notice? Is the pose open? Is it closed? Is it forward? Is it backward? What qualities are you seeing? And what are the visual cues that that's helping you come to those conclusions? What is that actor doing visually that is making you make that determination? This is a fun exercise, and drawing while you're watching television is really fun. You can pause it and sketch the pose, and I really think that's just little thumbnails, like these crappy little drawings I've been doing all night. Next challenge, up a level here. Go sketching on location. I sketch people whenever I can. It's getting more difficult because everyone's looking at their phone now. And you want to put yourself where people are engaging with each other, okay? So go to a park, a cafe. I don't know why I put airport there. But wherever you are, if you're in an airport, pull out your sketchbook. Find someone who's not on their phone. One thing I like to do when I'm sketching in public is I either put on a pair of sunglasses. Maybe don't do that at the airport. They get suspicious. But put on a pair of sunglasses, put your back up against a wall in a coffee shop, so people can't see your eyes. They don't know you're looking at them. Don't move your head up and down. Just move your eyes up and down. And you can sketch, and no one really knows what you're doing, okay? Someone looks at you, just kind of look in a different direction, and they won't know. But look for people, and then as you draw them, in your head, ask yourself, what do they want? What is their motivation? And then try to figure out a story verb that describes their behavior. And what are those visual cues? And also you can push it a little bit, right? If you determine that there's something they want, there's some kind of emotion or attitude or dramatic need, let that person be an inspiration and push your drawing a little bit further. Ask yourself, how can I make this really read, right? Because life is just there to inspire us. It is our springboard, right? And don't get caught up in details. Just look for the pose. Look for the acting. All right. And I'm going to leave you with one last thing. I've created a website now. I love doing these. I love doing these talks, and I'll take some more questions in just a minute. I love doing these talks. They're fun. I love teaching, and so I have two new things that I'm doing here. I just created the Cartoonist Studio .com. It's cartoonist with an S, and also I'm creating a new Substack for this kind of material, stuff that's about drawing. It's about poses, animation, comics, cartooning, all of this stuff. I want to have a place that's more about teaching and exploring these things than my regular Substack. Right now I'm offering, I'm not selling anything. I have some classes that I want to put together coming up in the fall, and they're going to be live classes, and I'll announce those at some point. And I'm going to do another free, maybe next month, I'm going to do another free workshop. I want to talk about color. So I see a lot of people struggling with color. So be looking for that. Joining the Substack is going to be a way to get on the email list. But I'm also offering one-on-one mentoring. You can go to thecartooniststudio.com, scroll down and see the studio sessions, one-on-one sessions, and I have several options. I've got a half-hour session. I've got an hour session. You can also, just like, piano lessons, you can buy a month's worth, and you get a price break on those. But I am offering those because I know a lot of people like to. They have specific questions, and they want to. And it helps to either have a one-on-one with me on Zoom, or I can do a video. I can do draw-overs on your drawings. Even if it's just looking at your portfolio, giving feedback, I'm happy to do that kind of stuff. So, having said that, I'm going to unshare my screen again and come back over here and see if anyone else has any questions. Great time. Happy to answer them. And just open up that microphone and let me know.
I will say I really appreciated the portfolio review you gave me. That was really insightful.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Out and work with. So
yeah,
definitely have to chat about that again.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely talk. There's when I talk to people about their work, I want to give them very specific things and directions to go in, because I think that's really important. That I'm not just saying that this isn't working, this is working. I want to find something and give you a clear path of how things can improve and stuff like that. So yeah, it's I'm glad it was helpful. Anyone else? Any questions?
Yeah, Eddie, where did the behavioral qualities come from? You had that kind of list broken down. What's the source of that?
I am the source for that. I am. This is something that I've been noticing, and through the years, and I've a lot of times when I'm sketching, I'll jot down little notes, because my sketchbooks are a mess. I'm not trying to do beautiful drawings. If people post beautiful sketchbooks on Instagram, and I don't draw like that. My sketchbooks are for me to work out problems and answers to problems. So so I'll write down little notes if I notice something, and I'll recognize something. But I started recognizing certain physical behaviors, right? That had qualities in the drawings that I could relate to. So I just put a bunch of them together, and I might refine those and change them. And but the fun thing now is, now that I have them written down, open and close was one that I've been looking at for a long time, and then you know, the heavy and light was kind of obvious. They're all very obvious when you think about them. But once you have them in your mind, I said this earlier, once it's a lens that you can look through, just like contrast and affinity, then you can start to control them, and then you can start to make decisions. I want this pose to be a certain way. Well, maybe it's too open. Maybe I need to close this off a little bit to convey the emotion or attitude. So that's where it came from. All right, guys. Happy to answer any more questions. If anyone has any, don't be shy. Or be shy.
I just wanted to comment. I left a comment in the chat earlier.
Oh.
The one Norman Rockwell piece.
Yeah.
Two girls.
Yeah.
The mailboxes are so obviously just there as a prop. You couldn't even see the tools on the ground.
Right.
Because looking at the two women, but it was obviously he just said, you know what? I'm the artist. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
The mailboxes there, but I don't want them to.
Well, they're in the way. They're in the way. He lowered them, and it doesn't really. I think about it. It doesn't really make sense in the perspective of things. But then again, maybe mailboxes weren't that high back then, because the mailman's on foot. So, but it's yeah. But you're absolutely right, because and this is where we often get tripped up as artists, is that we get caught up in the details, and we miss what the focus is on a drawing. So the focus in that drawing was the relationship between those two girls and the photographs of the same guy that they both have.
Right.
If any other element is keeping you from seeing that, it shouldn't be in there. And this is where those guys were masters. They knew how to stage things, but they also knew where they could fudge things a little bit. That doesn't need to be in the drawing. It inhibits the composition. It becomes a distraction. And we have to ask ourselves that every time we draw something, what do I need to tell this story? And is there anything keeping this story from being clear? And then you just have to get rid of it. Even if it's the best rendered thing in the drawing, you got to get rid of it, right?
It's like the other thing is the hardest thing when you're drawing a scene with two people and props. There's always a tangent somewhere, and it's like you've got to like move somebody's arm, finger, prop, whatever, because the tangent's there. You don't want it there, but in reality, it's there.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's those mailboxes are kind of like the same thing. It's like, how do you fudge it?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't make sense. I have to go back and look at that again, because from my thinking about it, I just grabbed that image today, just trying to find some good Rockwells. But yeah, it doesn't seem to make sense, but I'll have to go back and look at it. So, all right. Well, guys, thank you so much. I'm just now seeing the comments because, I get talking and the window's not there for me. So thank you everybody who made a comment, left a message. Thank you for coming. Appreciate that. And I'm going to put this up on YouTube. There's a bunch of stuff in here I wish I'd said or said differently, but hey, that's part of it. And but thanks for sticking around. I would encourage you, if you want to stay on the list for finding out when I'm going to do these things, sign up for the new Substack, and you'll get updates on all that. So thanks a lot, guys, and have a great night. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Eddie. Bye.
Thank you.